Okay, welcome back. This tutorial is going to be on creating land features for a typical rendering. So we left off here with a front view of the house. It's all gray. We created the land. I think I'm going to go ahead and redo that real quick just so it's all in one tutorial. Again, I want to clean this AutoCAD drawing up. I don't need these. These were in my linked file to help build the model. I'm going to go ahead and turn them off by going to select by name. I'm going to look at just my 2D geometry because I know all of these things are 2D, and I can go ahead and highlight everything I know I don't want. And I can right click and say hide selected. I see some other things here. Let's see if I can grab them and while holding control to select multiple things and hide them. So now I'm left with my land and my site features. Here's my topography. They're all polylines in AutoCAD, set to the correct elevation. I'm going to go ahead with anything I do. I want to make sure with anything I create in 3D Studio, I want to keep the original and not affect it. You can see this linked geometry. I'm going to do a Control V, and that will clone that object to its own new object, which is now an editable spline. That is easy enough to make into my terrain by going into my Create, Geometry, Compound Objects, and Terrain. And that gives me a surface that, as long as you set your topo lines where you need them, and you give yourself points along your topo lines, it should give you nice vertices for your land. I want to maybe even those vertices out. So what I'm going to do is go to the Modify panel, Quadrify Mesh. It defaults to 4%. Maybe I'll change it to 3. Rotate around, make sure they look kind of even to me. And I'm going to say maybe add a Mesh Smooth modifier way down here. And honestly, that topography looks pretty good for now. So what I'm going to do is right-click my terrain object and collapse all. That turns it to an editable poly for some reason. I'm going to make it a mesh just because I'm more familiar. And that gave me a basic land shape. I'm going to go ahead and put my generic material on there for now. Next, what I'm going to do is create all the road, the grass, the flower bed, the sidewalk, and the driveway. So what I'm going to do is, this terrain, I want to move it down. This is going to be the top of my driveway and things, but I do know I'm going to have like a 4-inch curve out here with the street lower. So I want to be lower than everything with my terrain. So what I'm going to do is go into my move function here. I'm going to right click it and I'm going to move it down -5. Again, everything I do, I will build up from there accordingly. But this way, my base terrain is going to be below my street. Typically in a render, I shouldn't really see this base terrain. But what I'm going to do for now is give it a material. I have a library I made of some typical ground materials here. Again, I'm going to sort everything, highlight these guys, minimize the unused nodes, double click the balls to see my material a little better, and go in here. And I'm going to drag my grass material onto my terrain. That grass material is a bitmap image, a very large, oops, I meant to say view image, a very large swatch of, excuse me, swatch of grass. I have it drawn as 20 by 20. When you look at the ground, you can see that this grass is, you can't see the picture. What that means is I haven't done my UV map yet. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a UVW map. And again, it defaults to planar, which is just fine for terrain objects because everything's going down. I'm going to go ahead and take this modifier, and for now I'm going to collapse it, which means it just meshes it into the mesh so that you can't change it again, which is fine. I mean, you can change it. You could add a new map and override that. So that's my base material, but I want to take all my line work that I drew, which are closed polylines, and create the actual geometry above that. So I can put grass on the grass and sidewalk, concrete on the sidewalk, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is go into my Select by Name panel. Again, I'm still in 2D geometry. These are my layers that all relate to site. I've sorted them in AutoCAD so you can find them easy here. We've got the flower bed. I'm going to hit Control and select the driveway, the grass, the road. I'm going to skip the topo because we're done with that. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and hide these other things that I don't want. Now I'm left with just my site layers. So I'm going to select these. I'm going to do a Control V. And I'm going to make sure I say copy. An instance will just copy gives you clean new geometry basically. So I'm going to say OK, just to show you. Now we made copies of all these 001 copies, and they're all currently selected, which is good. Which means I could take them and I could make sure everything's well above the ground plane. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move it a few feet up so that I'm sure it's higher than the ground. While all 5 things are selected, I'm going to give them an extrude modifier. And I'm going to drag it negative till it goes well through my ground plane. At this point, we're going to do intersections to make our ground objects. So I'm going to start low and go higher, I guess, is the best way. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is create the road. Again, all 5 things are selected. I'm going to go ahead and click out here, click my select just my road, which is, again, this line with an extrude, which is just fine. To do that, I'm going to do a compound object, a Boolean. I want to do an intersection, and I want to scroll down and make sure I retain the original material, which will keep the gray on there for now. Now all I have to do is hit Add Operand and select my terrain object. Now you notice my terrain is gone. It's just hidden. It hasn't actually gone anywhere. But now my road is still selected. While that is selected, I'm going to go ahead and open my material editor and give it a road material that I have here. So I'm going to assign material to selection, close my materials, and that's good. Now I need to get my terrain object back. So if I right click and say unhide by name, I have to look at 3D geometry now, and you can see my terrain is there. So I'm going to say hit that, and now it's back. Now again, while my road is still selected, it's coplanar with the terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up 1 inch. Offset world 1 inch. Now you can see that it's displaying correct now because that road is above there. The next thing I'm going to do is let's do the curves and sidewalks. So I'm going to go ahead and select that object, do a Boolean intersect, retain original material, add operands, hit the terrain. And again, sometimes I'll go down here and say isolate just so I can see what I did. And that is all the curves and the sidewalks. While it's still selected, I'm going to go ahead and give it's a Boolean. It's showing all these things here. I can collapse that right now. Might be the simplest thing to do to a mesh. Again, I'm going to isolate it. And I know I want this to be 5 inches thick to get me back up to that original ground height. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a shell modifier, which is a very handy way to do it. And type outer amount 5 inches. These will slope up, but I'll deal with that later. For now, this object is the way I want it. I'm going to go ahead and collapse all, just down to a mesh. And I'll go ahead and give that a concrete material, which is material I have to bring in here. Minimize these. I've got a few different concretes all linked by a multi-material here, but I'm going to give it, now you can see it put that material on there. Now I happen to know that my original terrain object was mapped, had a planar UVW map, so I'm going to go ahead and give this a box map so that the concrete will map the same on the top and on the sides. And I think that object is done. Let's go ahead and do the next thing I see, which is the grass. Boolean Intersect, retain material, add operands. Whoops, I have to unhide my terrain. Now, hopefully I can go back here and add operands, and this will still work. It looks like it did. So that's my grass material. I'm going to actually, while I've got that selected, move it up 4 inches and give it a grass material. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I click out of that command, click something else. I still got to make my driveway and my flower bed. So I'm going to unhide by name, terrain again, select my driveway, do a Boolean Intersect, retain original, add operands. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give that a road material. Looks like the last thing I have to make is the flower bed here. Whoopsie, see, I'm still in this Boolean command and I just clicked to select that. So I'm going to hope that a Control-Z will undo it. And I'm going to hit my select and get out of that command. I've got to unhide my terrain again. I'm going to select my flower bed, Boolean Intersect, retain original material, add operands, hit this guy. Bam, there's my flower bed, which I know I have to move up to match the grass, 4 inches. Going to go ahead and give that a material, a mulch material. Again, you won't see the finished mulch or grass because I'll use Forest Pro objects over them, but just for display purposes, that's what we want. Now this has the geometry mostly where we want it. Real quick, this driveway wants to move up that 4 inches. However, this driveway needs to actually slope down to the street along with these curves. So real quickly, I'm going to go ahead into that mesh. I've only got 2 minutes left here. This drive is still a Boolean object. I'm going to convert it to a mesh, which will give me these. If I go into the points, I can select these points. I'm holding my control button while I window these points. And I'm going to turn my snaps on and drag these points down to match. Undo, use my Z constraint. I'm going to turn off my object and just kind of get these good enough. That looks pretty good. I want to do the same sort of thing with my sidewalk curve there. So I'm going to go into my walk. I'm going to hit my points and drag these guys just visually to get them close. This is only a small percentage of the rendering, so I'm not going to worry for too long. But yeah, that's about the extent of the creation I tend to do in 3D Studio. And I think that will wrap up this video. I think we've got the features drawn as I give it a quick test render. And it looks like we got roads and grass and flower beds where we want them.